Hi you guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks again for being with me for another YouTube question and answer video of the week. If you are new to my channel, I always encourage you to subscribe and like and share and comment and just become a part of this community. Go on my website, which is themodernshaman.net, and go to that contact page at the very end and let me know if you have a question of your own. Also, I know I mentioned it in my last video, but my 2020 touring schedule for 2020 is up on the website, and that is inclusive of Raleigh, North Carolina, Chicago, Illinois, Honolulu, Hawaii, in Japan, I'm not sure of the city, Austin, Texas, and I think I'm missing one. There may be one more in there. Also, giving you another heads up, if you are wanting to dive deeper in your instructional psychic methods, I am about to launch my online teaching program. I have been doing this teaching program for years and years and years, but it has never been put online in these downloadable modules. It has been a goal of mine to create these videos similar to the way that I teach them in person, going step by step in a cumulative order through the psychic development, shamanic practices, and healing and elemental balancing. It is all on this new teaching platform, and that is scheduled to come out in January and February, the beginning of 2020. It's going to be a powerhouse year, you guys. All right, that's all the business. Let's get to the question. Here it is. She sent it in. She said, "Hi, Rach. I'm wondering how it is possible that there are people born throughout the centuries with clear psychic abilities, very strong, more than others. I heard you speak in one of your live streams about the fact that we all have our psychic abilities, but a lot of us cover over them with traumas and low vibrations and issues during the lifetime and never fully step into our gifts. But I don't understand how it seems that others seem to have strong abilities as they come in and are born onto this earth. Can you explain how that's possible?" Yes. So the psychic phenomenon and psychic gifts and kind of this awareness of how people seem to have extrasensory perception that is super powered, and others seem to have it in the background. And the first thing I want to say about this topic of psychic gifts and psychic powers and extrasensory perception, and I mention this all the time, it's the premise of my foundational curriculum that I teach in terms of psychic development, and that is that we all have the capabilities of connecting and communicating to the unseen world. Because our native organic nature and our sense of being, our soul space, is not human, it is not form. And so beyond the science of the body, the physiological connections that we have is our innate ability of being, seeing, expressing, and connecting. And so these are all innate within us. We are all capable of developing these gifts, and that again is the premise of why I feel that it's so important for everyone to understand that they are capable of connecting, and the empowerment there in my program and in others, just other people also that teach this type of stuff, is to move you into a place of owning what you are already capable of moving into. Now, the second part that kind of differentiates or goes further in that explanation is that just because we are all capable doesn't mean that we all come in with the same skill level of these abilities, all right? We, again, have, just like the human body, all right? Let me give a gross analogy. Like a liberal analogy that's broad in its scope. One of which, like, we all have human bodies, right? But some of us are more coordinated at using it than others. Some of us use it and that coordination to become famous ballroom dancers or gymnasts or athletes in exquisite ability and practiced devotion with those abilities. Now, most of us that have human bodies are not necessarily driven in the same motivational capacity to become a Olympic athlete or a ballroom dancer or something like this with our capabilities. And the same is true for our psychic connections or our extrasensory perception. Everyone has the connection and the capability, but not everybody is drawn to developing it. In the same way, not all human bodies are harmonious with their spiritual bodies. I have always been able to have memories or stored accessibility to memories beyond just this lifetime. And I remember choosing this body. And literally, I remember myself saying or thinking or telepathically communicating that the reason I chose the body that I chose in this lifetime was because it was an easy form for me to integrate my spiritual form with. And not all bodies are that way, meaning it's a huge spirit and they move into this really, really compressed form that requires so much arduous thinking and thought processing and very scientifically articulated expression, to where it's just like laborious to be in the body, but the spirit itself is huge and free, and so when that happens, it creates this dissonance and discord or disconnection or friction between the spiritual body, our energy body, our auric body, our soul, and our physical form. So if one has chosen a body that already sets the scene for a high growth potential life, then they probably pick a body which is in coarse dissonance with their actual spirit form. Many different religious doctrines will mention this distinction between the flesh and the spirit, or the body and the soul, and they will separate out these components, making it clear that we have a form and we have spirit. And if our spirit is defined as energy, our energetic components, our energetic makeup, what makes us us without a form, if we are without body and we're just in our essence, if that can be defined as our energetic body, then the physical form is used as a referential frame, okay? If you're familiar even with just the physics of that component, energy has to have a frame to create or have a mass to it, right? So energy itself doesn't have mass, but when you provide a referential frame for it, you give it a little house and a temple and a body, then it can have a sense of mass. It can have a sense of weight, which is that mass in combination with gravity of this earth and a sense of gravitational pull, so a movement or momentum added. It creates a literal weight, an ability to move through and express through time. Now, that's not always the same as like density, right? Because our energy body, our spirit body, our soul, or our core sense of essence, still needs a frame. But when a frame is created, a referential space or a body, and a spirit moves into that body or inhabits that body, becomes created in the womb and begins to move into that form, and the spirit or the energy takes on a form, a referential frame, then the creation component comes into play with it. And density is inclusive of the internal elements. Now, weight is more of the external elements, like what comes at it, a sense of force from the outside that makes it what it is. Now, density has an intrinsic value to it that is comprised of the volume of it, what it's made of, its components that give it a sense of that take on that wholeness of the density. Now, when we take on a denser form, and this, I know I'm explaining this in scientific terms, it's because I feel it psychically when I am outside of form and I am in the space in between realms, in different dimensional spaces, the space where we choose our bodies, these dimensional spaces. The way that I can feel a form is by the density of it. Now those intrinsic components are like the mass and the weight and the volume and the height and the length. All of those things are creating the internal structure of the density of that body. Certain forms or referential frames, human bodies, and I'm even loose with human bodies because this is also inclusive of the animal kingdom and the elemental kingdom and other kingdoms that create referential frames for energy to come into and express through. They express differently, but I'm using the example of the human form because of your question. So that being said, when we move our energetic body into a referential frame of a human form, it's inclusive of that internal density. And that density, to me, is comprised mostly of our DNA. And the DNA components, the way that they feel more weighty to me is when we have more activated DNA, which I connect just psychically in my understanding to the Akash, or a sense of Akashic record. Now this term, it's essentially our past life memory, even though there are no past lives because time doesn't exist like that. Now I believe that this Akashic records are our DNA storehouse of memory and all of those aspects of ourself that have been developed through many lifetimes in many different areas and spaces and dimensional experiences, planetary experiences, on planetary, off planetary, just all over. The essential essence and lifeline of our soul and the energetic makeup that is stored in the memory of our DNA. Now that in itself creates a sense of intrinsic density to certain forms more so than other forms. Certain bodies, certain names, certain inhabited forms more than others. Now if that density inside the body that you chose is in alignment with your purpose, is in harmonious balance with the spirit, then it's able to move and express very easily through that. Now that term Akash has been around for a long time. It's even in like Egyptian records they found, in Tibetan records, they found connections to it, although it meant like life force. It meant something different in the Tibetan terminology. But it's essentially, and with Egyptian also, it was a little different because it was more about the Judgment Day when someone passed away and they would move through and the Anubis would take them to a place where they would be judged and their heart would be put on the scales, between... The heart would hold the scales and kind of judge your deeds. It's like the Judgment Day. This was a similar archetype of judging the heart, of coming into a space of justice and purification after leaving the body to align with the integrity of your life, right? And this goes into pretty much every major religion, always has some sort of archetype for a judgment process afterwards, once leaving the body, to reviewing the book of life or the Akash, or what it was seen in your DNA. If it's holographic, viewing the movie that was stored within the body itself. And that body, again, links to this idea of what I explain as density, or having more intrinsic value that you're taking each lifetime and have within you, have accessibility to. Now, I bring all of that up because it is this component that I feel like is a major contributor to the psychic gifts or the superpowers or these seemingly superhuman powers, which are actually not super. They're intrinsic. They are literally a part of our DNA, but we don't all have them in accessible range. We're not always harmonious with those aspects of the self, or we're not always amplifying or have that DNA activated. A lot of our DNA remains unactivated within the form, and they call it junk DNA. Of course, it's not junk. We just don't know what it is. We just don't have access to it. But from the psychic realm, there is a lot of accessibility. That's the thing. It's beyond the form. It's beyond the traditional six senses. And so it takes you beyond the physical and physiological limits of the body and the form and moves you into that dream state or the psychological processes and gives more direction and ability to direct and turn on and activate the things that may lay dormant within you. That kind of piggybacks my first point, and I know that was a long little thesis on it, but this is me. You asked me, I'm going to go all deep with it in all different ways. But that's the point, is that we all have the capabilities within us, all right? But not all of us have them activated within our DNA, pulling from our Akash from other lifetimes where we used our psychic gifts on other planetary spheres when the forms were very different, living within other dimensional spaces when there is more etheric accessibility and telepathic communication. All of these things, you know, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's eternal. We have eternal capability and access to that eternal memory storehouse. And it lies within us. I truly believe it's connected to our DNA. And so, because every time they've studied DNA and tried to see if it has a link to this emotional issue, if it has a link to this little twitch in the eye, if it has a link to this psychological trigger, it's every answer over the course of every type of study that they've done is unequivocally yes, yes, yes. DNA has a starting point and connector to almost everything that we experience and what we call our life. And so it is our true intrinsic density of translated storehouse form for spirit to move through and express holographically or visually through. So you all have the capabilities, but the form itself and how harmonious you are with your own form, with your own DNA, with your own accessibility to the information that you carry as an infinite being of source yourself, because you are energy. So this creation within you and having an accessible connection to it and practice connection to it will bring it forth more, or make it seem like it's more superhuman. Okay. So my third point is that it is a practiced gift. It is not superhuman to become a Mr. Universe, right? And be this bodybuilder that takes the human form to its utmost capabilities. Those people practice, practice, practice. They are diligent with their goal. So the same accessibility exists within all of us in our extrasensory perception. And this is how I train people. This is why I say it's a muscle and you got to use it. Some people that have been using it more intuitively, regularly, they trust their gut. You'll hear people say that. I just always go with my gut and it's never steered me wrong. I hear a lot of businessmen say that. Now, if you practice living in that manner, same with the way that you choose your partners or the way that you choose friends, or as a mom, the way that you feel about the kids that your kids hang out with, there is an intuitive muscle. That one is called claircognizance. It is the psychic sense of knowing, and you don't know why you know, but you know. And this informant energy that gives you the accessibility to the cosmic web of information, that I will tell you that this muscle that you can develop is highly correlated and corresponds to the way that we learn, that we use our cognition. But this is beyond the human brain into our superhuman brain, or into our higher self, and the cognition that is beyond the processing speed of a human processor. And the main ways, or the three primary ways that we strengthen these muscles, are through the three primary ways that our cognition also learns, right? A visual learner. These are the three types of main types of learners: a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner. Okay, and they'll tell you this if you've been a teacher or you do any sort of like psychology of learning. And there's more. They break them into 7 groups and 10 groups. They break them into other groups. But those are the three primary ways of learning, of processing information through our human processor and through its input places. Now, actually, our indigo kids, our crystal kids, our rainbow kids, they're actually starting to gain more inputs. Okay, that's why it breaks down more. But I'm the 3 basic ones. These videos can get really complex, you guys. I have too much information to know, to share on these topics when you'll ask this stuff. I could just go on and on and on. But the 3 primaries, right, are the visual learner, the auditory learner, and the kinesthetic learner. Now, this directly corresponds to the 3 primary psychic senses. Your clairvoyant, which is the visual, right? Your clairaudient, which is the hearing, and your clairsentient, which is the feeling, the tactile information that comes through the body. And most of our training, when I do my psychic training, we work these muscles. We work the visual, leaning in to what you're seeing. And you practice it just like you would practice optical strengthening of the eyes, the way we would zoom into an object and try to gain as much detail and clarity as we can, okay? If I was to ask you to try to remember your birthday last year, and I just want you to try to get as much clarity on this psychic memory, because memories are stored in the Akash, in the same space in the DNA. The short term is a little different than the long term, but the process of moving your internal visions is the same as strengthening your clairvoyance. So the process would be taking something that is no longer happening at this moment, in this now, accessing it through our mental focus point or intentional effort, setting that almost like a dial on the GPS system, and then moving into the muscular use, just like you would be lifting a dumbbell over and over. Give me as much clarity and detail of that moment as you can. A lot of clairvoyants are very, very flowery with the way that they tell stories in real life. They're very detailed and animated in the way that they write. A lot of them are writers or poets, or very creative and expressive painters. They can give you the detail of a color because they can see every infinitesimal shade and the differences between the shades. Now, if you practice this, like remembering your birthday from last year and giving me every detail of what you saw, what did the wall look like, how tall were you when you looked up, and you didn't do that. So for instance, if I was to tell you, okay, go back, and we're practicing this, go back to that memory of your birthday a year ago, okay? And you're gonna have to, that birthday was a whole day, so you're gonna have to get even more specific than that. Remember a particular evening event, or a particular dinner that you had together, or blowing out the birthday candles. You want to get as specific as you can with it, because time is interesting, because it will cumulatively let you remember a memory in spherical cumulation, like the entire day in one memory. And this is the crazy thing with our psychic connection to events or timelines or things like this. We don't have to process them linearly. We don't have to wait and go through and remember step by step by step the entirety of that day. You can comprise an actual entirety of a birthday and tell me pockets of things that happened here and here. Now, when we language it, we're gonna have to language it in sequence, and it's gonna take time to go through each thing. But the memory accessibility of it is not always slowed by having to go through the sequencing, because we're not actually in time here. We're in time once we move and utilize a sense of momentum or speed or projection forward with what we're saying. We move it through into a timeline. Anyways, but that practice and going into a detailed point and then telling me, what do the candles look like? What do the colors look like? How are they flickering? If you look up at the ceiling, what do you notice? And you may not have looked up at the ceiling in the birthday. You may have been so much in the moment that you didn't even notice what the ceiling looked like. But if I ask you in a psychic exercise to look up at the ceiling and tell me what it looks like, you're able to do it. You're able to access that timeline through your psychic clairvoyance and actually utilize that vision, a pinpointed moment, and move your vision around without the memory itself having to store that information, because that's in the cosmic web. It's accessible to you without the bound of the human form without the human eyes. Even if your human eyes in that moment didn't record that moment of looking up at the ceiling, and I ask you to do it in a psychic exercise, you are able to do it. That is the power of our clairvoyance over our human form and memory. So we're all capable, but the form that we choose and the amount that we practice those gifts will all contribute to the ways that they are lived out and expressed in this lifetime. I hope that was a blessing to you guys. Tune in next week and we will be back here with another video. Mwah! And we are heading into the Christmas holiday, so if I don't see you then, I'll tell you Merry Christmas now.